So we're talking about the Uranus-Neptune conjunction today. And this is a lesson I've given before, and I'll probably give it every year because it's such an important topic. And there's always people coming into astrology that are starting to understand the implications of these long cycles. So I think this is always going to be a timely topic. And there's a lot of people that have this very peculiar and special conjunction in their birth charts as well. So there's a lot of reasons to be curious about this particular subject. So when we're looking at the Uranus-Neptune cycle, we have to look at it both in context of the personal and the collective, because there's a lot of people born in the early 90s that have this conjunction in their birth charts. And it's a more rare thing to have any Ptolemaic aspect between Uranus and Neptune in your birth chart because it is such a slow cycle. There's some people that have it, but it's a generational thing. When it does occur, there will be a whole smattering of people that will have this link between these two very slow outer planets that really are talking about collective social changes and technology that is dispersed among all of us over the course of time. So there's a whole group of people that really embody this particular conjunction. And it isn't going to be something that in everybody's birth chart is very personal to them. For some people, it's just going to be more background noise to their personality. They will have absorbed a lot of these influences, but it may not be something that is very peculiar to them. But there are other people that will have this conjunction, say in the first house or in an angular house, the first, the fourth, the seventh, the 10th, in aspect to a point, the ascendant, the midheaven. It will be an aspect to a personal planet. Those are all indications that we have somebody that's going to be personally acting out, be a personal expression of this really impersonal conjunction. So for some people, it's going to show up heavily in their personalities and in their motivations and in their life stories. And for some people, not so much. But it will be a part of their foundational building of the personality. So when we have a conjunction, we have a new cycle that is opening up. And we have two factors that are fused. So this conjunction between 1992 and 1994, it showed the birth of a new type of social order, a new type of collective understanding of our reality and the institutions and the social agreements and the values that we build upon that collective understanding of reality. And our collective understanding of reality changes from century to century and from era to era, because there was a time when we really thought that, say, Poseidon literally controlled the oceans. We thought that spell-casting witches were a part of our actual reality. We thought that Pegasus and unicorns were real. There's all kinds of ideas that in the past have defined our collective reality. And as a result, good point, Katie. And as a result, we instituted certain types of laws, orders, social constructs. Our values are very much built on that idea of what is it that we're all experiencing as a collective human family and how are we interpreting it. So these very broad interpretations of reality are something that are very centrally described by Uranus-Neptune aspects to each other. The politics that we institute, the politics that we build into our lives are also very much a function of the Uranus-Neptune cycle. And we see a lot of philosophical questions about the individual versus the group really come to the forefront. The very difficult questions of the many versus the few, or the good of the many. Does that outweigh the good for the few? These are hard questions to answer. And with each cycle, I think we get a little bit closer, or we also have the potential to get a little bit farther from coming to a more accurate answers to those very, very difficult social questions. So we have a new vision that was birthed in the, I'm not even sure if birthed is a word, but I'll use it anyway. A new vision that was birthed, was given rise to in the early 90s of a new type of social order. And we hear that term, the new order, thrown around. It typically strikes fear into people's hearts, but it can very accurately describe some of these larger cycles. It doesn't have one connotation or another. It's just describing a new type of how we order ourselves. And that could be positive or negative. It could be good for the individual or not, depending on what problem we're dealing with, what kind of new order is developing. But sometimes a new way of doing things is a good thing. Sometimes it's not. It can actually be regressive rather than progressive. It can actually be restrictive rather than freeing. And so with outer planet transits, they can be very much like transits to our natal chart, where sometimes we may take 2 steps forward and 1 step back. We can do that socially as well. And we often see that when we come to the opposition point of a cycle. Sometimes we can see a very different response to what has been building. You can throw that over for a totally different type of action at that point. And we have the opposition coming up here in 2078 between Uranus and Neptune. And we will either have the enfolding of what we have built since the early 90s into that next cycle and the completion of it, or we'll have the repudiation of what we have been building and have that thrown over for a different type of pursuit. So this is the seed period of that new era that we're going into. And it's still very early. I mean, this conjunction didn't happen that long ago. And the expression of that conjunction now is about 30 years old. These people are around their Saturn return at this point that have this in their natal charts. So this is a very fundamental point in time where we have this cosmic expression of unity really coming through these very odd individuals. This is an odd combination to have in your natal chart. It implies a certain level of creativity that is not always present in the personalities of most people. And there's a whole buttload of people that have this specialness within them. So what does that specialness look like? It's the ability to see clearly. That is a possibility. It's also the ability to imagine a more connected world, to be able to envision what it would be like to have a more legitimate peace. I know we all like to give lip service to world peace. Everybody likes to say, oh, if I could have one wish, I would wish for world peace. Where that might actually be what is in the heart of people that have this in their birth chart. That's a real pursuit in their life. That's a realistic pursuit for them. That's not something that they like to envision without giving action to. We have the beginning of a new technological cycle, and the people that have this in their birth chart have been thinking about things in a new way, envisioning things in a new way. And now they're at the age where they can really put these ideas to work in the real adult world. They can run for office, and I hope that they do. They can rise to positions of authority and be able to spread this idea of, can't we all just get along, and really make that stick. So there's a broad way of imagining life when you have this conjunction. It's not limited by the laws of now. Because it comes into Capricorn, there's an acknowledgement of the laws of now, but there's also the ability to imagine what we could be and to stretch the now into a more progressive future. So this is a cycle that lasts about 170 to 172 years. And at the beginning of it, just like the last cycle that occurred in Capricorn, at the beginning of the cycle, we see an explosion of technology and ideas. And that could be, up to 50 years of the beginning of that cycle, because it is a long-term cycle. And we saw the very early stages of the Industrial Revolution the last time we had this cycle, and we saw the early stages of the Tech Revolution the last time that we had this cycle. This is a predictable cycle in that each conjunction occurs at about half a sign away from the last one. So you get 2 conjunctions in each sign. So there's the period of 170 to 172 years, which is the Neptune-Uranus cycle in itself. But then you have the period of 240 to 245 years, where we have the Uranus-Neptune conjunction in one sign. 2 consecutive conjunctions. This is really the beginning of that last opening period that we're seeing in Capricorn. So the next conjunction we're going to be seeing in 2165, which will happen in Aquarius. And I have lots of thoughts about that. I think that's going to be where we're dealing more with this really difficult social issues concerning artificial intelligence, robotics, Aquarian issues we will be dealing with at that point. Right now, we're dealing with very deep structural issues. How can we hang together? How can we govern ourselves as a world society? Because with the kinds of technologies that really burst forth around this conjunction, really even the 20-year period of time preceding it, that is something that has brought us into a global type of society. We all laugh at the same things now. We all share the same internet memes. When I lived in Europe as a child, there was a decided difference between European society and American society that is not quite there now. We all share a lot of the same information, and it is a fact that we have a type of global culture evolving and morphing, and we are connected in ways through not just technology, but travel that we didn't used to be. So this cycle is very much about how this innovation, how this invention, how our collective ideas are dispersed among us, and what are the social implications of these individual lightning bolts of genius that we have, because the individual is moved to invent, to innovate, to be creative. And then that bleeds out to change the rest of us and to bring us all into a new type of world. So that personal creativity has enormous consequences. And that can be good and that can be bad, depending on what it is that the individual has to offer and how is it received? How is it used by the rest of humanity? So how do we elevate each other through our personal genius? How do these leaps in individual human awareness bleed out to provide the springboard for leaps in more worldwide awareness? So we have the butterfly wing effect that we're very much looking at. And we look at this conjunction, and it is a conjunction to take very seriously if it is personal to you, because you have a type of social responsibility when this is present in your chart.